This is the story of the Great War that Rikki, Tikki, Tavi fought single-handed through the bathrooms of the big bungalow in Sigowli Cantonment. Darzy, the tailor bird, helped him, and Chuchandra, the muskrat, who never comes out into the middle of the floor but always creeps around by the wall, gave him advice. But Rikki Tikki did the real fighting. He was a mongoose, rather like a cat in his fur and his tail, but quite like a weasel in his head and his habits. His eyes and the end of his restless nose were pink. He could scratch himself anywhere he pleased with any leg, front or back, that he chose to use. He could fluff up his tail till it looked like a bottle brush, and his war cry as he scuttled through the long grass was "Rick tick 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 tick." One day, a high summer flood washed him out of the burrow where he lived with his father and mother and carried him, kicking and clucking, down a roadside ditch. He found a little wisp of grass floating there and clung to it till he lost his senses. When he revived, he was lying in the hot sun in the middle of a garden path, very draggled indeed, and a small boy was saying, "Here's a dead mongoose. Let's have a funeral." "No," said his mother. "Let's take him in and dry him. Perhaps he isn't really dead." They took him into the house, and a big man picked him up between his finger and thumb and said he was not dead, but half choked. So they wrapped him in cotton wool and warmed him over a little fire, and he opened his eyes and sneezed. "Now," said the big man, he was an Englishman who had just moved into the bungalow, "don't frighten him and we'll see what he'll do." It is the hardest thing in the world to frighten a mongoose, because he is eaten up from nose to tail with curiosity. The motto of all the mongoose family is, "Run and find out." And Rikki Tikki was a true mongoose. He looked at the cotton wool, decided it was not good to eat, ran all around the table, sat up and put his fur in order, scratched himself, and then jumped on the small boy's shoulder. "Don't be frightened, Teddy," said his father. "That's his way of making friends." "Ouch! He's tickling under my chin," said Teddy. Rikki Tikki looked down between the boy's collar and neck and snuffed at his ears and climbed down to the floor where he sat rubbing his nose. "Good gracious," said Teddy's mother. "And that's a wild creature. I suppose he's so tame because we've been kind to him." "All mongooses are like that," said her husband. "If Teddy doesn't pick him up by the tail or try to put him in a cage, he'll run in and out of the house all day long. Let's give him something to eat." They gave him a piece of raw meat. Rikki Tikki liked it immensely, and when it was finished, he went out into the veranda and sat in the sunshine and fluffed up his fur to make it dry to the roots. Then he felt better. "There are more things to find out in this house," he said to himself, "than all my family could find out in all their lives. I shall certainly stay and find out." He spent all that day roaming over the house. He nearly drowned himself in the bathtubs, put his nose into the ink on the writing table, and burned it on the end of the big man's cigar, for he climbed up in the big man's lap to see how writing was done. At night, he ran into Teddy's nursery to watch how kerosene lamps were lighted. And when Teddy went to bed, Rikki Tikki climbed up too. He was a restless companion because he had to get up and attend to every noise all through the night and find out what made it. Teddy's mother and father came in, the last thing to look at their boy, and Rikki Tikki was awake on the pillow. "I don't like that," said Teddy's mother. "He may bite the child." "He'll do no such thing," said the father. "Teddy's safer with that little beast than if he had a bloodhound to watch him. If a snake came into the nursery now—" But Teddy's mother wouldn't think of anything so awful. Early in the morning, Rikki Tikki came to early breakfast in the veranda, riding on Teddy's shoulder, and they gave him banana and some boiled egg. He sat on all their laps, one after the other, because every well-brought-up mongoose always hopes to be a house mongoose someday and have rooms to run about in. And Rikki Tikki's mother, she used to live in the general's house at Sigowli, had carefully told Rikki what to do if he ever came across white men. Then Rikki Tikki went out into the garden to see what was to be seen. It was a large garden, only half cultivated, with bushes as big as summer houses of Marshall Neal roses, lime and orange trees, clumps of bamboo, and thickets of high grass. Rikki Tikki licked his lips. "This is a splendid hunting ground," he said, and his tail grew bottle-brushy at the thought of it, and he scuttled up and down the garden, snuffing there and here and there, till he heard very sorrowful voices in the thorn bush. It was Darzy, the tailor bird, and his wife. They had made a beautiful nest by pulling two big leaves together and stitching them up the edges with fibers, and had filled the hollow with cotton and downy fluff. The nest swayed to and fro as they sat on the rim and cried. "What's the matter?" asked Rikki Tikki. "We are very miserable," said Darzy. "One of our babies fell out of the nest yesterday and Nog ate him." Said Rikki Tikki. "That is very sad. But I'm a stranger here. Who is Nog?" Darzy and his wife only cowered down in the nest without answering, for from the thick grass at the foot of the bush there came a low hiss, a horrid, cold sound that made Rikki Tikki jump back 2 clear feet. Then, inch by inch, out of the grass rose up the head and spread hood of Nog, the big black cobra, and he was 5 feet long from tongue to tail. When he had lifted 1/3 of himself clear off the ground, he stayed balancing to and fro, exactly as a dandelion tuft balances in the wind. And he looked at Rikki Tikki with the wicked snake's eyes that never changed their expression, whatever the snake may be thinking of. "Who is Nog?" said he. "I am Nog. The great god Brahm put his mark upon all our people when the first cobra spread his hood to keep the sun off Brahm as he slept. Look and be afraid." He spread out his hood more than ever, and Rikki Tikki saw the speckle mark on the back of it that looks exactly like the eye part of a hook and eye fastening. He was afraid for the minute, but it is impossible for a mongoose to stay frightened for any length of time, and though Rikki Tikki had never met a live cobra before, his mother had fed him on dead ones, and he knew that all a grown mongoose's business in life was to fight and eat snakes. Nog knew that too, and at the bottom of his cold heart, he was afraid. "Well," said Rikki Tikki, and his tail began to fluff up again, "marks or no marks, do you think it's right for you to eat fledglings out of a nest?" Nog was thinking to himself and watching the least little movement in the grass behind Rikki Tikki. He knew that mongooses in the garden meant death sooner or later for him and his family, but he wanted to get Rikki Tikki off his guard, so he dropped his head a little and put it on one side. "Let us talk," he said. "You eat eggs. Why should I not eat birds?" "Behind you! Look behind you!" sang Darzy. Rikki Tikki knew better than to waste time in staring. He jumped up in the air as high as he could go, and just under him whizzed by the head of Nagaina, Nog's wicked wife.